This week on the Yoakum Strength podcast, we have on Dr. John C. Ditch. John is a professor at Carroll University, runs a sports science consulting group, and loves all things biomechanics. Throughout the episode, we talk about his insane garage research facility, what devices seem to be worth the money, a ton of various biomechanics relating to jumping, and an aggressive return to play protocol for his own injury. As always, thanks for listening and enjoy the episode.
Before we hit the intro music, I wanted to introduce to you guys the Yoakum Strength Insider. The Yoakum Strength Insider is our online training platform that takes all of the ideas that we talk about on this podcast and implements them into a program that is available to you at the touch of your fingers. Our goal with the Yoakum Strength Insider is to create better movers, to level up your life, and to move forward from where you are. We do this in a holistic fashion. Not only will you receive a program that has helped hundreds of people become better movers, you'll also receive access to our app that allows you to track everything, has video links for all exercises, and allows you to be in constant communication with a Yoakum Strength coach. Along with this, you'll get our 30-page PDF nutrition and lifestyle guidelines. That includes everything from what to eat, how much of it to eat, why we're eating it, meditation habits, and other lifestyle habits that we implement with our clients to really level up their lives. If you're interested in trying out one of these programs, use podcast 25 in the discount section right before you pay for 25% off your first program. Boom.
This is the Yoakum Strength Podcast. Take the leap down the rabbit hole with us as we interview elite level guests to unravel what high performance really is.
All right, well, Coach, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you here.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, you officially have the coolest basement I've ever seen. I lived in a basement for a long time, and it was not nearly as cool as the basement I'm looking at right now. What do you got there, man? What have you been building out down there?
Yeah. I love technology in that realm of sports science and maybe a little bit too much, but in the garage, we got a few bipods. Um, got
Do
a,
you think you're the only garage with a bod pod in it?
yes, but I'm not sure how proud I am of it because just like they're just sitting there and I've got some things over it and I live in Wisconsin, so it's super cold, which is not great for these bipods that I probably should not have. But we've got some Ultra G anti-gravity treadmill that I just got with the Achilles. Um, we've probably had about 6 or 7 pairs of force plates through here. Probably have like 3 or 4 still in here, which is not a great thing because they need to be used. They need to be used. We can get into that later, but normal rack. I just sold some dumbbells, unfortunately, but we have a metabolic cart, some EMGs, all sorts of fun stuff. And then if we need to make anything, we have a 3D printer with some electronics, and that's a whole different realm of things, but velocity trackers and whatnot. But yeah, we got some fun.
Yeah, dude, that those eccentric overloaded things you made at Home Depot were badass. I made a mace once at Home Depot, like a loadable mace from like some template somebody posted, and I felt so cool. And then I saw you post those. There was like the eccentric hooks that like detach, and so people know what I'm talking about at the bottom. Then you come back up. I saw you made those. I'm like, fuck me, bro. How would even have the coolest thing that's made at Home Depot?
Yeah, those things were, I'm not gonna lie, those were super sketchy because like really, really sketchy, especially if you want to put anything over a plate on them, which a lot of guys, when they get up to doing those, are well beyond that. But yeah, a little sketchy, but they worked. That's what matters at the end of the day. Sometimes it's like they worked. So,
Well, one of the things I want to kind of hear about is your journey to become this kind of sports scientist, technical expert where you say you're too far, like you like it too much. Because you talked about when you were 12 years old, your big thing was breakdancing, and like you wanted to become like a professional breakdancer. You posted a really cool video of like one of the professional breakdancers doing just fucking insane things. If you guys ever listen to Joel Smith's podcast, he talks a lot about how cool some of the stuff that happens in breakdancing is. But like it seems like those two realms are on like complete opposite ends of the spectrum. It's like a performative, artistic way of expressing the human body and expressing everything that it wants to do. And it's probably a field like parkour where parkour is finally catching up with even just basic strength conditioning principles. But like, there's no way they're using force plates. Or like, how did you go from a field and like being obsessed and starting in the fitness field in that realm of things and then progressed it to what I look at as the opposite spectrum of things. And not that it needs to be the opposite spectrum. Obviously, like there's people that could benefit from being pulled into the middle like parkour is currently. But how did you like make that journey and transition?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, dancing came from a very heavy dancing background. I actually worked as like a head camp manager for dance and cheer camps for a summer, which was an interesting experience for sure. It was a one summer only kind of thing, but whole family was into that realm, so kind of got merged into there no matter what. But just like I think that a lot of individuals they encounter some kind of injury, and then because they learn about the body, they want to go into the performance space. I feel like that happens quite a bit. Or if we want individuals who just happen to like want to be um, good at sports. I'm going to say good as a vague term, but maybe their genetic potential doesn't allow them to get to that same aspect, and they just become obsessed with it. I'm definitely in that boat of things in terms of the breakdancing style of things, the art of it. And I think a lot of times when we get in exercise science, it's very cut and dry, anything scientific in that realm. So being able to merge the two is um, very satisfying. And I'm a person that likes to categorize things into buckets as much as I can just to make sense of rationalize some things. And the fact that those two have a difficult time kind of merging together, I think that obstacle itself is a major reason why it drew me in. So if that answered your question.
Yeah, did you come from a sporting background, or what were your main like sports growing up or going into college, or what were those things that initially drew you in?
Yeah, so I was a decent basketball player. I had three consecutive fifth metatarsal foot breaks. I didn't get to play it all my senior year. It's pretty crazy. I actually played one game and I was very out of shape and overweight. But I was pretty decent. I came back and uh, the summer and only had to play one game. Ended up playing some small D3 basketball. One of my teammates was actually, you guys probably know him, Max Marzo, the
Oh
son of
yeah,
my
oh
science
yeah.
guy. Great guy, super knowledgeable. And actually just did his tournament. That's actually where I tore my Achilles. But yeah, I played some basketball for a bit. Now I've gotten to more of the dunking aspect of things and kind of trying to increase the vertical and or try to find some weird goals to orient my own things towards like a like weighted pistol squats and skater squats, weird things like that, just to kind of take my time up. But yeah, basketball predominantly. Um, did a little bit of track and field, but way back when. But besides that, just basketball.
So with that, you just said you had that big Achilles injury. Like, I've seen some of your stuff on Instagram and social media, and I think that's initially how I found you. The comeback has been pretty crazy. Like you had some definitely some non-traditional from a PT standpoint aspects going into it. Could you go into some of just how the different methods you've went, maybe different supplements that you've taken for that?
Yeah, for sure. So I am technically 9 weeks out of operation, so post-operation. Nowadays, you can go non-op or surgical, and in terms of the like the prevalence rate of re-rupture, it's about the same now, which is awesome in terms of the new research. Um, but with that being said, you have your regular scheduled encounters with your surgeon, your PT, and they are taking more of a conservative approach. Some of the things I'm doing by myself in kind of the basement lab area is definitely on my own terms, and they may or may not be aware of it as much as they may believe. So a lot more loading in terms of a static, um, we're going to say static environment, and then more dynamic loading over the past few weeks, which has been a little nerve-wracking. But in terms of that, been doing that with some more of like the Berlin methodology, which is super cool and upcoming. But also taking some supplements such as, of course, some collagen, vitamin C, and then some kind of non-traditional BPC 157 peptides, subcutaneous injections, which are very interesting. And I hate needles. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think the first few times I attempted to do it, I was actually at this desk and I was like, I'm gonna film it just in case I do pass out. Like I like it was one of those things where like you have a blood drawn and I didn't realize that I was an individual that always looked away from the needle. And then all of a sudden I'm like right here, like doing it myself and then like halfway
Oh, dude,
looking. And I was like, oh
there's
no.
absolutely no way I could stick myself. I could barely let them do it, bro.
And I made the mistake I've done 2 rounds now, 10 milligrams per vial, but on the package it says for research purposes only, not for human consumption. Fun stuff. Um, but I tried doing it at that location, so near the Achilles, which there's not a lot of fat in that general area, so I had some struggles with that. So now I'm just doing it around the the abdomen, like a normal
So
person. Yeah.
So are you recording all this and you're probably going to make like some sort of case study? Are you going to end up publishing this or are you going to use it for something or put it out there after? Because I know based off your background so far that you have recorded this meticulously and there's going to be a crazy multi-page case study coming out of it.
And I would love for it to be, I would love for it, but also the the scientist part of me is thinking like, hey, like an N of one, like I understand that's phenomenal for like medical case scenario, but I don't know if I can put that out there knowing my biases of my own personal. Um, I think I definitely do have a lot of content. That's actually why I bought a camera. And then I realized I need to trim down the videos because I have like a little over 200 gigabytes of video. And I'm like, oh God, like I need to put this in order. This is not going to be attainable to put together, but definitely going to do what I can in terms of documenting it in like a uh, consumable manner because that right now it's not in a consumable manner for anybody. But hopefully it can help from future weight bearing aspects of things for Achilles because a lot of the Achilles stuff out right now, especially what the PTs and the surgeons are aware of, are very conservative, very conservative.
How have you noticed the BPC helping? Because you and I talked about before, where like when I took BPC and I took it orally, like I noticed my knee was like really catching and like giving out left and right. Had an ACL meniscus tear in there senior year of football, and kind of just like a couple of years ago, I was like stepping and it just felt like something popped in there, and it was really bad for like 3 months. I took BPC orally. Literally 2 weeks later, it felt like a brand new knee. It was completely wild. And then I've given it to people that have had the same results, and I've also told people to take it that they were like, dude, I don't really notice a difference like here. So have you noticed a big difference with it? Like, well, what has been your experience with it so far?
You know what? I think it's been good. I hate that. One thing I hate about the Achilles is I don't have a lot of sensory input output with
Yeah.
that general area. And I have Raynaud's really bad. Like I've had family members lose extremities in terms of fingers because of this Raynaud's. I know some people say like, oh, I have bad circulation. It's like, yeah, but like we unfortunately have it to a very bad degree with like the fifth metatarsals too. But so I don't have a lot of sensory input output with it. But I'm going to be optimistic and say, hey, yeah, it's definitely helping because I haven't had any issues so far, and I've been loading it pretty strenuously. So yesterday I just got to a new PR, which I'm being careful because I like just want to go for it. And I already had a conversation with my wife, and I was like, you know, we're gonna be aggressive with this because I have some goals in terms of vertical jump that I want to hit. And if it snaps again, it snaps. We'll go non-surgical, but like we got to go right now. Like I'm about to be 31. I'm not like this is my time to go. So we got to go. So we actually had this conversation. We could pull her on here and she'd be like, yeah, yes, honey. And but no, but so far we got to 1100 newtons of force. So like it's around like 250 pounds of a seated plantar flexion, which I'm super happy with.
How's that
I'm
compared to
like
the strong side?
strong side, I'm up to a little over 1800 newtons. That's also like 99th percentile for 31-year-olds male. That's the cool thing about Vald. This is not a shout out of Vald. I'm not sponsored by any company, actually. I just have a lot of things in my background, but they give some normative values, which is super helpful for the everyday coach that doesn't have time to dig through literature. So
And did you test the healthy Achilles before, or did you get this piece of equipment after?
I got this piece of equipment after.
Okay. I was gonna
Um,
say it'd be kind of cool to see it like what it looks like from before to now.
I wish, and I think that's a lot of there's a ton of questions out there, and I think that's why I don't know if individuals are aware that after all the Achilles ruptures in the NBA, they actually put out this initiative, a research panel to like look for Achilles tendon rupture mechanisms and whatnot behind the scenes, and like they only do that when it's very serious, and obviously they're losing money due to number of athletes being taken out. But I don't know if they've came to any specific findings in that itself in terms of mechanistic occurrences. I wish I knew why, and that just makes me think of like knowing some normative values of myself before snapping it would have been super nice. But yeah, I mean, that just goes to show the importance of testing athletes as much as possible. So
One other thing I saw on your page that's, I've seen in textbooks and seen before is the unilateral transfer training. So like by training your non-injured limb, you can still see some gains on your injured limb, whether that be legs or arms. And I've definitely seen you post about that. How much, I guess I've never seen it in person. Like what kind of actual results are you getting when you're training that non-injured leg and seeing the transfer over to the injured leg?
yeah, that's a great question. And right now, since I'm such in the largest early phases of just testing legitimate numbers, not just like 300 newtons of force, 400 newtons of force. I'd like to say that there is an improvement, at least in my confidence. So maybe a neural or neuromuscular improvement with that, which I would be very, very happy with in of itself. Especially since I do believe a large mechanism of tearing in the first place was a lack or uh, a delay or lag in the firing rate of the Achilles or the gastroc and soleus at that time. So I do believe there is some benefit there in terms of the tone of the muscle coming back. I do believe it came back sooner than it would have, but also this just assumptions at the end of the day.
And when you talked about tearing your Achilles, you mentioned you made a post on that, like a couple of reasons why you think it tore. One of the things you talked about was the shoes and the difference in shoes that you have. I was interested. Do you think it's the actual shoes itself, and it's something that like basketball players specifically should look into the shoes that they're wearing and like that type of thing? Or do you think it was you trained in the one shoe and it was like just such a difference in the shoe? Or do you think it was individual? Like what do you think about that shoe situation that you brought up there?
And so I'll
And maybe
definitely
tell
say,
people about the shoe situation in the
yeah.
first place for people that didn't see the post.
Oh, for sure. This is a definitely a fiery topic just because when it is presented, it usually people take some bold sides. They're like, hey, yeah, it was the shoes are knocking people off. Um, I definitely think on this individual basis, with like my underlying things, in terms of always, whether it's training on the court or in the weight room, always in barefoot shoes. They made these new basketball zero shoes. I actually really like them. I actually just bought another pair in a high top version. Now, I have nothing against the high top, low top, what I believe, and I'm not a specified researcher in that area at all, so I'm speculating. I could be very wrong. But in terms of the feedback, I decided to wear these more cushiony shoes um, after the first game of the tournament. In the first game of the tournament, I took it pretty light. I was on this free agent team, so we had a mixed match of individuals on that team, kind of conglomerated together. Good Lord. But uh, the fact that I did change shoes and had less input output, and we just talked about, hey, I kind of lack in that inferent efferent realm of things. I think that definitely had something to play. I remember during the event itself, I placed my foot down, but I wasn't fully aware of where my foot was placed and whatnot. So proprioception, awareness of where the body was. I wasn't even sure if I stepped on a curtain, and then I looked back and the curtain's like 10 feet away. I'm like, oh man. So it felt like I had shot in the back leg. Now, I think shoes could have some kind of play with that in terms of the heel to drop ratio, especially when a variety of shoes are very, very different, such as you look at the Achilles tendon protocol at 12 weeks. Typically, it's 12 to 13 weeks. They have you transition to a shoe and then put some heel lifts in there. But those heel lifts are specified, but all shoes, running shoes, basketball shoes, everyday shoes are all different in those heel to toe drops, like upwards of 15 to 0. And I think the average is around like 10 or 12. So there's a lot of variety there and a lot of uncertainty. So I definitely think it could have something into play, but it's definitely complex, as we all know.
But when you're looking, you're talking about the feel of the foot on the ground and like the proprioceptive feedback that you get. And it's kind of, it brought me to like, I think, can't remember if it was a study or it was like his speculation, but Rob Gray was talking about in his book how people with concussions, I can't remember if he was saying it was a study are shown more likely to tear their ACL or he was predicting that they would tear their ACL just because that perception and the ability to like take a hit from the side just because you're not fully like locked in, being able to see everything. But it's a higher rate chance of tearing the ACL with a concussion or just not being like fatigued was another one where it's just like you're not seeing the hits, like you're not taking the hit the right way, kind of taking a blind side, but it's part of that proprioceptive feedback. How does that work with the foot? Like, do you think there's a better way to train the foot? Do you think it's just like the insoles you have on the shoes to like get better feedback? Because like it is like when you're playing sports, especially I'm thinking like cleat sports, dude. It's like you really do not have a ton of feedback on that foot. Is something like you think about training beforehand, or just it's better cleats? Because like basketball shoes, like I like, yeah, I've had multiple different basketball shoes, and some it's like, dude, it's literally like you're walking on a pillow. You have nothing, you feel nothing, and then other ones are like it's pretty solid. So like I've noticed a difference there too. But when I put my cleats on, man, it's like my feet almost disappear. Like it's such a different feel.
Yeah, for sure. I I think it's safe to say it definitely has a major output, whether it's like the physiological readiness, the whether it's fatigue from like a central nervous system standpoint or a local standpoint of things. I saw a recent video from a scientist. He is not US, he's not a US native, but talking about the concept of the jerk, whether there's impact forces, the foot touches the ground, there's a heel dropping, but the force dissipation or the force generation is coming from both yourself muscularly, but in opposition due to your center of mass moving forward. And it, looking at it from like the outside looking in, it looks very simplistic, and then you're realizing, okay, the force translation is not firing. You miss it by a few milliseconds. The amount of tendon pull is enormous, especially if I'm a 200-pound guy, and I can generate some decent forces. So if there's any mild degeneration there, which I definitely had some degeneration in the MRI, I've been still asking for the darn MRI for some time now, then it's definitely going to go. Training in particular, before that, I definitely think I personally could have done some things just to put myself into positions that I am more aware of in terms of making more impacts behind my center mass, just as a training stimulus beforehand. I definitely think I could have improved. I definitely am of the appearance that I think I was in control of everything I can be. I like to be like that because if I relinquish control of certain aspects, whether it's an injury or not, then I mean, I feel like you got to own it all or you just own nothing of it. So I think I could have done a lot more in terms of strengthening and not just generalized strengthening, but like uh, task specific strength related to impacts at a higher velocity at those angles because I definitely did not have enough exposure to that.
Well, that's a kind of a cool point that you made is maybe other than sprinting, what is the thing? Like most of our plyometrics are not in a space where you're pushing from behind the center. Like almost everything is like, especially when it goes plyos, it's like you want to be almost in front or like straight on. You know what I mean? Like I've never really thought. I mean, maybe if you're doing a switch hop, but pretty much everything you don't really think about training that beforehand.
Yeah, and I just hit a PR in a 40-yard fly, I think the week prior. And that was the most sprinting I've done in a few years in terms of building up. And apparently I believe like a little over 70% of all ruptures now are asymptomatic, which I think that's the scariest part.
Yeah.
People aren't even aware of it, which man. So that's why I'm a little scared. I'm like, oh man. And that's why I'm taking the BPC just because um, the prevalence, I believe, of my left side, I tore my right side, my left side tearing is probably pretty high. So I want to be extra careful taking those steps. But yeah,
Yeah, dude, the Jake Tura has ruined my. I never used to think about Achilles tears ever, and then Jake just kept posting them, and now it's like, dude, every time I feel something, and I'm like, oh no, don't go, bro, I'm gonna drop. That's gonna suck. But yeah, the fact that it's like, man, that's. I tell people all the time, I would much rather tear my ACL than my Achilles. Like that's such like a scary, like just like gunshot, bro, like out of nowhere, just random gunshot.
and Jake does do a phenomenal job of putting things out there, but the same on the other side of the coin, like he's doing more Achilles stuff now, obviously, with the specified need, but he posts some knee things. I've never had knee pain in my life, but sometimes like you read some stuff like that and you're like, oh man, I gotta be you feeling more hypersensitive about that specific area. And I'm like, man, I've never had knee, but like this feels a little funny now. And it's like, no, no. So I understand that for sure. For sure.
So what's the goal with this Achilles rehab? Because you're talking about how a lot of the current approach is pretty conservative. What do you mean conservative? Is it the time frame that you get back? Is it just what we're doing? And like, how do you think we can shift it? Like, what's your end of one study going to be when you're going through this Achilles? What's your end goal? Is there a timeline difference, training approach difference? Like, what's our approach there?
For sure. I think early weight bearing has been definitely kind of funneled away. Just like actually my other prior injuries, the fifth metatarsal, I was casted for like 6 weeks and then got to be in a boot, and it was like very slow from there. Um, in terms of these areas in which there's a ton of injuries taking place, they're usually in the bloodshed area of specified region where there's not enough blood flow there. And that's also a major reason for the BPC 157, increasing angiogenesis, the formation of new vascular areas for blood flow. So I do hope it does help promote the conversation of more weight bearing earlier on the process. I'm huge for that. It was 2 weeks post-operation. My scar was not closed by any means, but we were doing some isometrics in the back. Like I feel like you just got to push it in that realm of things, and so that's cool. That's my hope for that in terms of overall global that other people can gain from it. Me personally, I've got some like physical goals. I definitely want to reach an older goal of mine. I want to hit a 50-inch vertical, and then I also want to get an East Bay, and I've been putting off an East Bay dunk for quite some time. I'm a 2-foot jumper now that my feet are I think I'm fragile actually a little bit. I'll say it. But so I want to hit those goals. And if I hit those, I'll be good. I'll be good. Just
Is there
like
a, do you want to improve the timeline? Like, what's your timeline
my
for these things?
timeline. I'm hoping within a year from now I hit the 50.
Damn, that'd be sick.
Genuinely, genuinely. Yeah, because I was sitting around 45 before this, and I was a bit heavier than I needed to be for sure. About 200 pounds, 6 foot. So that was definitely limiting my capacity. I was holding on some extra weight for sure. That's a terrible thing about having the bod pods in there too, is because you can hop in there and they'll tell you right away, like, hey, you, you might need to shed a few. So like there's no escaping. There's no escaping that. So
What's the return to play timeline looking like? So right now, obviously,
mhm.
you're putting in some work on the force plates, getting Newton readings and stuff. But like, when do you feel like you'll be at a position where training resumes and is going as normally, like pre-injury wise, like from operation to regular resumed training?
So with the conservative approach, and I've noted this down, and I try not to look at it too much just because I know the system as great as it can be. I'm not sure how my body's gonna react. The plan is to be back and moving to like a RTP, return to play status, at like 20 weeks. We're at 9 for typical. It's beyond 26 weeks, 26 weeks minimum. I'm being conservative with that. We're far ahead of that schedule right now, which is awesome. I just know that I have a tendency to overdo some things. So I'm gonna say 20 weeks would be, we're moving around doing some submaximal movement patterns, some jumping, but we're in the mix at least. So
And you said that goal of 50-inch vertical,
mhm.
and you said you got all these different apparatuses. What 50 inches on a force plate, 50 inches on a jump mat, 50 inches on the Vertec reaching, or how are we measuring this 50 inches? Because I know anytime somebody posts a crazy jump, there's going to be at least one hater in the comments saying, well, that's on a X. Or like somebody jumps something, they're like, yeah, but that's on a force plate. So really it's this. What is that going to be on, and how are you actually going to measure that?
Yes, I love this, and I've got another little thing to add too. Um, on a force plate, and actually, so my other
You're doing
company,
50 inches on a force plate?
no, 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 that's impossible.
Oh,
That's
I was
literally impossible.
Jesus
No, no,
Christ,
no,
dude.
no.
I was gonna say,
So,
I was
so,
like, what the hell, dude?
and to
Last time I
clarify,
jumped on a force plate, I got my ego hurt so bad, bro.
It's like 19 inches and you flew, felt like I flew.
Well, I was in the air forever. Oh my
so,
God, bro. I was
so
like, what the hell?
I make a wager. I'm not gonna say bet, a wager with go around to different schools here, and I test these schools for free if they're willing to do testing. Make them athlete dashboards provided the coaches if they'd like to. I think the hardest part is just having the schools allow us to come in. I had an LLC called Performance Physiology Institute, and then realized I'm doing it all for free, and I haven't charged a dime or asked for any money over the last year and a half that it's been open. I was like, okay, you know what? Let's make a nonprofit. So we just started this nonprofit. But now when we go in there, we continue to do so, and I haven't beat yet. And I say this to my kids in the lab because I bring my own lab items into exercise physiology labs because I teach that at Carroll. And I say, hey, if anyone can beat me, actually, this is just for the students, not Carroll students. Outside of that, I'll give you $100. My Cunningham jump. and that's hands on hips. For the record too, I've never seen, and I've dug through a little bit too much literature. I've never seen any hands on hips kind of jump over 31 ever, ever. I don't think anyone's ever hit it ever, and I can confidently say that. I know there's two NFL guys that were nearing 30. And also, yeah, I'll leave it at that. But they may or may not have been the most natural human beings ever. But my right now, hands on hips is a 27.6, which I still
Wow.
haven't been beat yet, which I'd love to beat because I need something to chase. I need something to chase, you know. But on a Vertec, um, on a seated propulsive only jump, which I did that in research, I highest of that is a 41 from a seated position, and standing reach at 94 inches, which is not generous to myself as a 6 foot person. I don't have that long of arms. I'm stretching it out. Um, but Vertec for official jump, if I use force plates in general, my rule of thumb is jump height is great. It's an awesome metric to kind of like gauge things, but I'm not looking at jump height if we're going to use force plates. I'm looking at other braking, force at minimum displacement, propulsive, impulses, peak forces, all that fun jazz, and we can get into that if we'd like to. And I've even based my own training around this. And I've got some pretty crazy devices that I kind of made, including a winch, like a 5,000 pound winch that pulls you down. So it's no matter what, it's gonna be super maximal. Like we're gonna get it in. And that was based off of improving braking forces, which it did. It did. I think it definitely took a toll, but it improving specific qualities to improve that overall output of jump height. Um, but that's where things kind of lie. That was kind of roundabout answer, but yeah.
Yeah, dude, that's gonna be sick. I want to get into the technology stuff, but I have one more question with this injury-based stuff. And one of the things you said is all ownership or none when it comes to some of this injury stuff. And you mentioned on an Instagram post, it was like integrated and system-based approach to injury prevention and athlete management. And you were talking about how there's, even when you're listing your own injury, like there's so many complex things that go into this. Like there's previous training background, there's the shoe switch, it's the fatigue of the day, everything like that that goes into this. How do you like how do you take all ownership and like start to see things that matter without like getting nihilistic that kind of like none of it matters, you know, like it's just like too complex or none of it matters, you can't prevent injuries. Like how do you find that middle ground? And I guess it's not a middle ground when you're talking about taking all ownership of it, but in a system that is so complex, in a thing where like maybe you did stay in your same shoes and it's still like pulled and there was 17 other things going on that day that like led to that, or maybe it was just a spot on the court, whatever it was, and you're talking about like the milliseconds of like if you fire at the right time versus you don't, you know what I mean? Like with all of the things that go into play, how do you like not just chalk it up to luck, and how do you not just chalk it up to like there's a billion things I have no idea what to fix, I'm freaking out?
This is something I've encountered with other things, which we can get to. Um, like ignorance is bliss for sure. Like I think as we kind of develop, as I went through like other external like degree programs, I've been realizing that it's been harder for myself in terms of programming for myself than ever before. Every single time, I'm like, oh man, but I'm aware of this other aspect of training that could take place of it, or it can confound some other stressors included with this. So I've definitely noticed that, and ignorance is definitely bliss. In terms of taking ownership of it, um, I think I'd either way I'm going to be stressed about something in relation to the things leading up to it. Um, I would feel much better about saying, hey, like, man, I fucked up. Like, I did not prepare myself enough, than to be like, shit, I had bad luck. Like, because if I'm relying on the output of some overt external thing that I have no idea what it is, like, then I've lost the power in this situation. And I'd rather be in a net loss of in terms of the power and still know that, hey, I have an objective view, and or I still have the steering wheel for this too. I can try to correct as much as possible, but I feel like as soon as you release that control, then you're going backwards. In terms of data overload, that is definitely a thing, and I think we're experiencing that in the field in general right now. Um, I went to a round table recently in Illinois. It was actually great. Uh, uh, Shout out to Renee Matta who put it on. Um, but the overlying thing was like, hey, we've got these force plates, we've got these timing gates. How do we incorporate it with our athletes? And that's a major thing we talked about. Like, okay, like, are we using it as a monitoring tool? Are we using it as a way to flag athletes that may or may not need to increase or auto-regulate how much stress they're being induced by, you could say. And I think that was a major topic of consideration because right now we have like the field of strength conditioning, and then we have the field of like sports science, and the tendency or the the motive of pairing the two together when that is a lot to handle at once. That is a shit ton to handle, and I don't think people realize like yes, it can be simplistic, but at the same time, like to make sure you cover all bases, it's a lot. I think it's a lot for for any strength coach, best strength coaches in the world to handle. I think that's why they're typically separated in an environment that has that kind of funding and whatnot. So the data overload, I try to look at when I have these pieces of equipment here just for um, exploratory analysis. I like to use that a lot in terms of my own mental well-being because if you just take up all this data and it's not used for anything particular, it's just wasted time, wasted effort. So try to gather what I can, whether it's plantar flexion, standing weight bearing, and allowing some kind of self-feedback is a huge thing with this too, because you can easily get caught up in the details of like, okay, I need to increase by 100 newtons uh, this week over this week. And then it's like, well, shit, if it's not feeling well, then why push it? Because we're still humans. Um, so I think we got to give ourselves a little bit of grace with it too, and only try to indicate what we want to measure before we actually measure it.
So I like how you mentioned the merging of tech would be a lot for any strength and conditioning coach. And I've seen it with a lot of athletes before where a coach or a practitioner will say like, yeah, we're using these force plates to monitor fatigue readiness, and they all do their jumps, but nothing changes about the practice or the session that they're about to do. They just do the jump. And after athletes see that nothing changes, it's sort of they don't get the buy-in. So now they're not giving like their full effort. And so then the whole thing becomes kind of useless. What would you say, just in your own personal experience, would be two or three items and metrics that coaches could actually use and put into practice that would be not easy, but usable and meaningful?
Absolutely. And if we're talking like force plate specific,
Force plates, timing
oh,
gates,
yeah.
any sort of thing that like, hey, these would actually be, we can use these because we can't monitor everything every day. And so like if we have a team of 40 people, I think these two, three, four things would probably be the most bang for your buck to have meaningful impact and change on their programming.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, I've had I've been very lucky to use a few different systems that are very popular in the environment right now. I actually in my PhD program, I went to Liberty, so like it was distance, but I still need to make sure that I had research grade items. So I took student loans out to buy some Hawkin Dynamic force plates and some software. And I'm going to tell you, do not do that. Like if you're listening at home, just don't do that. Now, do I regret it? Absolutely not. I love them. I love them. Absolutely. But with that being said, I had a genuine want and curiosity to determine what we could and couldn't do and like how they could actually be helpful. In terms of metrics specific for an intended goal, if we're analyzing a team per se, I think there's some underrated ones there. Hawk Dynamics, once you do a counter movement jump, you're automatically going to have like 56 or 57 output variables. If we're looking at fatigue in particular, I think a very overlooked one is going to be force at minimum displacement, or it's going to be indicated maybe as involved as force at zero velocity. But that metric in particular, especially with an individual in the counter jump, whether they are subjectively feeling fatigued or um, they're feeling great, but their body's like not ready to handle X amount of stressors for the practice that day or whatever. The counter jump is such a fast ballistic movement that they don't have time to react in terms of loading into the jump. And what I mean by that is um, it occurs so quickly that when they go down to the braking phase at the very bottom of the movement, the force at minimum displacement, um, you don't have time to self-adjust or auto-regulate in that time period. So the amount of force you're going down with at the very bottom to kind of reactively strength up into the propulsive phase, there's not a lot of self-correct or time for self-correction. So that's going to be a huge point of interest because you're feeling good. You're gonna want to go back down into the braking phase as hard or as violently as possible. That's a great key term if you want someone to really load in the braking, is to go down violently or aggressively. I think that's a largely overlooked one. Reactive strength index, as well as modified reactive strength index, as well as um, I'm gonna kick myself for saying this. Um, in the right context, eccentric utilization ratio, EUR, looking at a squat jump and a counter movement jump, the pairing of that just to see how well the person is utilizing that eccentric. I think a lot of things that we're looking at now, and I think it's finally trending that way, is eccentric focused training. Not saying eccentric only, but a lot of the positive adaptations that we're seeing. And I'm an eccentric based researcher, so I'm very biased. So take that with a grain of salt. But we're seeing a lot of adaptations that convert over both the eccentric and concentric coupling that can be inherited by eccentric focused training, which is like a lower total workload in general. But yeah, I think those are some key metrics that could go a long way if kept consistent over time. As long as there's some variation to like the duration of that squat jump going down, those results can significantly be changed. We're actually submitting a study either tonight or tomorrow based on that as well. But consistency is key. Even if you had a jump mat or those apps nowadays, that can be a huge thing as long as it's consistent. And also, people overlook subjective RPE. Huge, huge. And that's just free, low-hanging fruit right there. And they think that's potentially the most reliable in terms of retest reliability for someone's physiological readiness to perform, which is super cool. I never would have thought, but the research is pretty overwhelming in that aspect.
Well,
So you
I
mean
think
talking? Oh, go
what was
ahead.
that?
I was gonna say you mean talking to your athletes and like asking them how they're doing is like going to be a pretty good indicator if they trust you and have faith in your decision making.
Crazy, right? Like, um, and they had like they actually quantified it too, where it's like after, and I know they had specific age groups, but um, after X amount of days, I think it was like around 2 weeks, the accuracy of their feedback improves. They feel like going to a 0 to 10 scale. But yeah, crazy idea to ask how people are doing, um, which is just so weird that yeah, to go back and forth on that.
Well, one of the things I think we're kind of like skipping over is the fact that we're able even to have these conversations of these are things people can test because you and I were talking before the podcast started like 10 years ago these were not things you would have in the field. These are things you would have in your exercise science class. And I remember like when I was in football they took like 10 of us up to the exercise science class and we did like haphazardly like just because they got a new toy with the force plate but they were still learning everything with the force plate like but it was like weird like super disconnected. And now 10 years later the same school has like three force plates at their school, just and they test with their athletes every single day, right? So like we're finally taking the science practical base fear of things into the like real life athletes and in the gym. And I think having them in the gym is such a big piece as well because now athletes are actually given intense. I remember walking up to the exercise science lab with all these football guys. They're like, bro, what the fuck are we doing? Like, why are we in this room? Why are we in this lab? Like, what are we doing? And now it's super cool that it's in their space. It's in a space in which they know, okay, now it's time to get after this. This is what we do every single day. But it's cool that we're finally taking the things out of the classroom and applying them to real life situations. And I'm interested to hear you talk about like one, where you think this is eventually going to go, but two, like how did this happen? How are we like progressing in this way to where like we're finally able to do these things that we've talked about forever in because this might be the one time where it's like everybody says like the science is let's say 10 years behind like real life, but this is finally a time in which like science was ahead, but we just didn't have the practical application of even just having a piece of equipment that you could bring to the weight room that just didn't blow the strength conditioning budget.
Oh, for sure. We're in that weird time period where like we're constantly waiting for like science to improve, or it can only improve because when technology meets a certain threshold so that it can improve so we can measure objectively things that we weren't able to before. And now we're at this weird time period, especially with strength conditioning, where we have these things in there, but now we're like, holy crap, like we haven't gained enough or gained enough to make these conclusive decisions on what the heck we're looking at. And I think we're in this weird space right now. I think there's some great researchers out there right now putting in the work to make it clear for all the practitioners. And I also think this also leaves some room for practitioners to also become these um, researchers in a way too. Um, and I think this kind of bridges into like lately, um, the one thing I do dislike is at certain points, um, maybe on some kind of social media, someone will say, um, in terms of a negative aspect, in terms of research, like, man, like this did not show this, whatever. So I've been kind of going out of my way and putting comments on people's things like, hey, do you want to do the study? Like, I will do it for you if you want to do it. And now I haven't got a lot of replies, but actually one individual did. And I think we're actually doing a research study now.
Hell
Never done
yeah.
it before, but that's where we're at. We have the communication needs. I've got the resources. The only reason I have these resources is because number one, obviously didn't have there's a barrier to entry in terms of cost. I've never paid anything in terms of retail cost, except for the Hawkins for anything. I got a BioPods for like $300 a piece, which those things retail like 70K, which that shouldn't be like that. And no, I didn't steal anything. But I think we're at that weird time period where um, the research is not behind closed doors, not behind this like curtain, and we're actually able to like see what's going on and actually be a part of that too, which I think is super important. And I think that's just going to speed up as time goes on. Um, and obviously are huge with schools in terms of what they can or can't afford. So that's huge. And in my own personal realm of things, I'm a professor. I don't get paid very much. So getting some of these items, you have to look for great deals. That's I think that's the one talent I do have in this world is finding these weird deals with these things, which I'm okay with for now. But yeah, hopefully I answered your question. But what was the second part of your question? I'm not even quite sure. Okay.
To be honest, yeah. I feel like you answered the question the way that we wanted to answer the question, so that was good.
Yeah,
Well, what?
yeah. Well, actually, I think the future of it too. I
The
mean,
future,
everything's
yes.
gonna go down in price. Everything's gonna just
Well, that's what I
now.
feel like. It's like kind of like the cell phone. Like when the first cell phone came out, it was like only the very top people were able to get it, and now it's like everybody has a cell phone. That's what I'm kind of getting with this. Like the Force Blade is the perfect one because it's like you literally never saw them except at really big budget SNC places that like had one, and it was like a crazy deal for somebody to have a Force Blade. Like I remember the U got a Force Blade. Everybody was like, "Holy shit! Like that's crazy. We can go do this." And now like Welty and Brian have one at Velo, and it's sick. And they talk about it and they like experiment with it all the time. And I feel like that's going to be the hopefully the trend with things. Even things like the 1080 sprints, like that is something I want so bad. And it's $20,000, bro. It's like that you cannot make that a thing. But there's no way it's not like the at least hopefully there's no way it's not like the cell phone where eventually it just becomes the competition goes down in the market and we can finally start to produce these things for $200.
So I have been doing some side consulting for free. I probably should charge for this, but there was this they're now Athlo, but they used to be linear encoder, and they were for $199 you could get this 3D printed version of it didn't provide resistance, but it did have a motor in there to pull back the line. But uh, timer that looked or acted like a 1080 or T Apex, but for $200, it just didn't provide resistance, but the accuracy of it was up there. We're in the middle of testing it before the first prototype ended. But for instance, stuff like that, that's why I have a 3D printer. I want to print off my own things. Pasco Scientific in all caps. Um, they have an academic use force plate. They retail for about $500 if you're in the academic industry. If you're not academic, they charge more. It's just one of those education things. Now you can find them on eBay kind of thing. But the reason I bring this out, you're like, oh, $500 compared to these AMTI. Um, there's studies in terms of validity of them being attached to AMTI and have the same 99.7% accuracy to these AMTI. And those AMTI plates are, I think they're like 56,000 a piece.
Bro.
And actually, I actually recently got a pair of in-ground ones from Singapore. It's terrorists for something serious, but and then sold them essentially for the same price to a buddy. And actually, I think he was on your podcast recently, John Evans.
Oh hell yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so he's got them now, and I was like, yeah, I I'll sell him the same price. I just want to see the data of those jumpers on there because he's got some animals. He's got some animals. He has been sending stuff over, so I've just been enjoying playing with the data. Um, but yeah, I think it's trending towards a little bit more affordable, reasonable for the individuals that actually need these resources. So strength coaches. So I think it's definitely got a positive direction to it.
So you mentioned you were a professor too, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about specifically was the difference between reading a textbook, getting that base of knowledge that is needed to actually have proper arguments, proper conversations on any specific topic, and then the applied knowledge. And I think it really leads itself into what you're talking about, some of this equipment becoming more affordable and more usable, is that you're seeing strength and conditioning coaches, private coaches, athletes buying some of this stuff themselves and putting some of the theories they're reading about and looking at like into practice immediately versus like, oh, well, we have one lab day on our during our whole undergrad where we see a force plate one time, we do two jumps on it, and I don't really get anything of it. Could you kind of go into how you do teaching with those students, like just the basic book knowledge type versus the applied learning?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm currently I feel like they just add names to the thing. That's okay. A visiting clinical assistant professor. I think the clinical was added in there just because they don't. I kept submitting IRB requests for research, and they're just like, "Gosh, this guy is probably annoying." And but right now, this semester, I've had opportunity to teach both the exercise physiology courses in undergrad, and then all of the labs. So usually there's like 3 or 4 labs, like 16 kids a piece in there, and I love the labs because we could actually do hands-on work. And a major emphasis in terms of the labs that I really try to push is, for instance, this upcoming week we have maximal cardiovascular testing. So some VO2 max using some metabolic carts, um, and it takes a lot of effort, and I don't know how long or how often it was used in the past. But with that being said, um, we take the whole class on an hour and 50 minutes during that class just to go through, okay, can I confidently set up this really expensive piece of machine and put it on the individual and put it away, as well as reading the results. So I think we go on there, we're like, yeah, let's be able to read what's happening on a physiological level. This individual, their ventilation going up, their CO2, O2 output changing. Cool. But anybody can really learn that. The difference that you can put on a resume, I know how to operate, set up, tear down, and communicate the findings with individuals to make actionable decisions. That's huge. And I push the, hey, since you guys have this opportunity, and I just happen to really like the technical aspect of things, and I was open up the insides of it to determine like, okay, this is what's going on because that makes me make sense of it. Um, I think there's a huge benefit that they're gaining on that level of things because it's one thing to look at a textbook, and I think a lot of times um, it does get scrutinized just because we look at a textbook and we get these like little micro piecemealed aspects of like, okay, this is occurring in terms of glycolysis. Perfect. That's wonderful. Whereas when we get the practical application setting, we're able to see this moving machine, and then our human nature is to like point at it and be like, oh yeah, this is lagging in this. This to point out some imperfections is way easier. Um, And with that being said, and I think we notice more negative aspects of things during our labs, we'll have obviously worksheets to go through and lab manuals, but the overall theme is like, hey, gather your data. If it's incorrect or if it's like off a bit, that's totally cool. Which stresses kids out. It definitely stresses them out. But if you mess up, like the odds of you remembering how and why you messed up is going to stick with you for a long time. So that's why I try to emphasize in that way in that capacity. Um, but yeah, there is a disconnect, I think, out there currently in terms of what we do offer in terms of a school setting and then bridging the gap into their actual in the field, being able to apply it with a real life human, which is hard. Very, very hard. Those soft skills as well, huge.
I was going to say, do you make most of them or not make? Do most of them get the opportunity to do these tests? Because I know that was one thing from like a sports science or like athlete perspective is you'd have these practitioners be like, all right, like, yeah, we're just going to like do this test today. And you're like, you realize like how intense and rigorous and like much testing takes out of you, especially when you get into the cardiovascular side of stuff, when you're doing maximum VO2 testing, like maximum lactate testing, maximum finding for any certain activity. And you'll have a practitioner be like, oh yeah, we're just going to do this today. And it's like, well, you've clearly never done this because this is really, really hard. And unless I'm in like the right headspace, it's going to be hard for me to like give it my all to actually do it.
Dude, when I was in football, we had a game on Saturday. I had a lab on Friday, and the professor was pissed at me because I told her I wasn't going to go run a max VO2 test a couple hours before our walkthrough of our next game. I was like, do you realize the test you were, and like if I get on there, I'm not stopping. Like I'm just gonna run until I die. Like, do you realize like what you're asking for what we have the next day? And it was like a whole like 50-minute conversation. I'm like, this is so stupid. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, everything is purely volunteer basis when it comes to maximal. So max VO2 on the treadmill, as well as which they hadn't done in the past. I had to kind of relearn how to recalibrate the dang ergometer, but the wind gate. Have you guys ever done the wind gate before?
Hmm.
Which necessitates that you have the trash can by the individual. Oh man. So that is volunteer basis only. Although last semester we had a great output. We had about 4 or 5 kids per class do the VO2. So 5 kids per four. We had 20 kids do a VO2 max in a semester, which is pretty awesome. I was super happy with that. And everyone has a job and a role. And yeah, yeah. So volunteer basis for sure.
Well, I think even them seeing it is huge because I mean, there you see it in like the textbook. You see a video of someone like jogging on a VO2, and you're like, "This is how you conduct it," and it doesn't look very strenuous. Versus even if you're not doing it, and you see a classmate do a full gas Wingate or like a VO2 max, and they're bent over, hobbling, like sitting in a chair after for the rest of a lecture, like zombified, you're like, oh, this is hard, and I should probably think about this and take it into consideration when I'm planning this testing with their training loads or with their competition schedule. And it's not just something like a counter movement jump where I can throw it in at the beginning of a workout and it doesn't really take anything out of them.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask, and we do have like right now we'll have a lot of handwritten notes from the football coach, which is reasonable. We should not have these kids doing max out test because they're all competitive too. Like when you go on there, like kids will like look over while doing the test and be like, "Oh, that guy's at 42 milliliters," and it's like, "Gosh, I got to get past that." And it's like, no, and I've had kids. Yeah, I've had you got to catch some kids in the back sometimes, because we do some variations with the incline. There's different protocols you can use, but we do the incline one on the woodways and caught a caught a person before kind of thing. Yeah, but yeah. And, I mean, I think those are fun though. High energy and we actually recorded. I got a few videos on my page and we recorded when we had 4 people going at once. And this is like not that large of a lab space. They're like one next to each other doing 4 of them. Like real metabolic carts by Cosmed kind of thing. So that was pretty cool.
That's pretty sick. I've never seen a VO2 test done next to somebody. I feel like that would be a lot more motivating.
Yeah, 4 of them. And I was like, and one of them was a cross country runner. Like he was a good cross country. He was in the middle of them
Cooking
too. Like
everybody.
on the right. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be interesting. So, but yeah, lots of fun.
Having the research experience inside of things, is there a piece of equipment that is either that you have access to that is like the current force plate? Like Tendo units force plates were something that were very rare. They started in the exercise science like departments and they trickled their way down into the strength conditioning field. And now we have them pretty accessible. There's ways to do those things. Is there something that you currently have now that you think is eventually going to trickle its way down to, or something that you maybe have an idea of that eventually will be like that? Or do you think we kind of got it and now it's just going to be like the cell phone where it's just cheaper prices?
Yeah, 2 things. The cell phone apps, super underrated. And I own a lot of ridiculous items, and cell phone apps are super, super underrated for sure. Um, and I think the number one thing is like if it's easily accessible and it's going to increase the likelihood that you're going to use it more consistently, wonderful. That's just why having a cell phone in terms of using the camera is so nice. Even if you do have a super nice camera, it's like, well, it's always there with you. The odds of you consistently using that item is going to be way higher. So that's what's most important, I think, on that aspect. In terms of technology trickling down, I do believe, and I love the tech as it relates to the commercial coming down as well. But in terms of motion capture,
Mm,
although
that
my
would be sick.
background, oh, and the motion capture with markerless base, so no markers on there. But in theory, with AI and specific algorithms, as more research is compiled, um, kinetic forces may take the place. And I've talked to quite a few biomechanists on this, and they believe it's going to trend that way as well. That force plates may be seen as obsolete in 10 years from now, kind of thing. Predicting forces to a very, very high degree. Um, I think that might be, I think at some point they will be. 10 years might be a little tight, but we're definitely trending that way in terms of predictive, predictive based video. Um, and that's a whole, biomechanics itself is a whole different beast for sure. My background's in physiology, but my PhD is a little bit more in the physiology and the biomechanics. Um, but I think that's going to be the future, without a doubt.
Dude, I'm just imagining like you being able to whip out your phone, record a set, and it shows the forces at certain parts of the body, how you're like sequencing those things. Like that would be so fucking dope, dude.
I it's definitely coming. Like we're advancing at such a fast rate right now that yeah. If I had to put my money there, I think it's going to be there sooner than we think. So that's exciting.
Yeah, that'd be dope. One of the last questions I want to ask you, you talked about applied load to an athlete when it comes to like injuries. And it's like the athlete, you were talking about the athlete's ability to handle the applied load versus like when do you know basically like the injury is the athlete being unable to handle the applied load. How do you know, and like when do you know, or what's your philosophy on, okay, we need to increase the athlete's ability to handle that load versus we need to lower that load? You know, like when it comes to the sports science thing, the answer seems to be these coaches are stupid. We need to like lower the load, which I actually agree with in a like from a lot of football practices I've seen. But it's also like when does it get to the point in which we also need to do a better job of like raising the athlete's ability to handle load? And is there just a load that we really can't prepare them for? Like, what's your thought process and philosophy of balancing when to either raise the athlete's ability to handle the load that is causing that injury that they're unable to handle, or when it is it like you're being an idiot, we need to lower this?
Shit, I think if I had, yeah, that's a great question just because I feel like if I had the perfect answer for that, I'd be swimming in some money
Yeah.
because that load monitoring and athlete readiness is such a huge thing. And that's the primary reasons for these sports scientists at these high levels. Um, and I think it's super interesting. I've just been watching, it brings up my thought process of like, I don't know if you guys have seen like the Tour de France um, show on Netflix. Super interesting. I never even watched the Tour de France in real life. And then that came up and I was like addicted to it. I've never cycled in my life. And I was like,
Tristan's a
holy
big
cow, this
cycler.
is sick. And I saw that. And I hadn't known anybody that was into cycling, but became aware of it. And then I realized they aren't necessarily showcasing some key individuals behind the scenes that are like making some decisions to withhold or take back individuals. Um, and right now they're just man-made, everything's man-made, but man-made thresholds that are dependent on a certain criteria that we've just miraculously pulled out of nowhere. Um, and in terms of making those decisions, and I hate to say this too because it takes more time and effort, and I think it's an easier response. And that's the only response I think I can give is on individual levels in terms of responders, non-responders, how well an individual does adapt to it, which is heavily dependent on making sure you have a ton of data on that one individual. And then that means you're already in a hole in terms of making decisions. And at what point in time do you make those decisions? That's hard to know. I think the more data that we get to compare from, to kind of categorize where this individual stands on that spectrum and developmental of, say, we improve braking forces or propulsive forces um, in a performance light of things. I think that'll improve to make those decisions. But right now, I don't think the fact that a lot of the data that is kind of accumulated at these higher levels are typically held for their own use cases, which is totally okay. They're funding their own things, um, but it could definitely be more useful as time goes on. Because right now, the general public, and my general public, I mean everyone besides the highest levels, are getting these items to gather data at a very high degree. Until that kind of tide rises in terms of the data available, I don't think decisions like that are nearly going to be as cut of dry. But I mean, the next few years, I think if more data is publicly available, I think that'll be clearer. But in terms of developmental athletes, like youth training, man, that is such a hard thing to identify for sure. And I know like say velocity-based training where they auto-regulate based on the velocity of specific load, which I think is super, super cool. I love velocity trackers. I make some velocity trackers down here. They're actually very easy to make. Um, but at what time aspect do you hold off and really push the athlete? Shoot, I wish I had a good answer for that. Man, yeah, I'd be well
Do,
off.
do you think it also kind of depends on almost the resources you have available? Because you see that at like a big, just like maybe not as much with the NIL, but like you saw that in, like the big SEC schools, like it's kind of like you have so many people, like your rosters are so deep that you can kind of just afford to keep that foot on the gas. And when somebody happens to fade away, like you have somebody to fill their spot, so it's not as big of a deal versus on more of an individual sport where, hey, like if LeBron on your team goes out, you're like, oh shit, this is not good. Versus like, oh, I have eight LeBrons on my team, so I don't really care who gets hurt.
Well, dude, that's I was thinking the same thing. Like what you're talking, like it's kind of like the like Chinese like USSR like approach to we want to make them super physiological. We want to make these people handle super physiological loads. The only way to do that, you are going to break people, but you're going to create specimens. And I guess you could argue, are you creating the specimen or were they the specimen? But the Tour de France is a perfect one because if you're looking at like you're not load managing the Tour de France. It's a fucking super physiological test.
There's
And
no load management.
there's no like, so how, like the balance between those two things, I think about it all the time. It's like you want to create people that are super physiological while also talking about how we have to load manage for the average and like how do you like is it again maybe it is just the N of one of like okay you are an average athlete that can handle this and the super physiological people like we need to train in a different way and load in a different way and understand they can handle all those things but it seems kind of like is the goal to keep as many athletes like is your philosophy that those super physiological people were not created by that program but just survived that program, then you could say keep as many of our athletes healthy as possible and then we'll have more chances at those super physiological people being there? Or is your philosophy you created those super physiological people through the insane training program that you had and you had an accepted injury rate to go through? And like you're talking about the SEC, like that's the perfect example of that. Like you have 100 five-star recruits on your team. Are you right with breaking a couple because you just had the next person up? And then, but again, is it the philosophy that you created that person or they just survived the training that you had and they were just freaks regardless?
That that's huge. I mean, we've seen it for quite some time at the professional level, especially like you go to some professional game and you're like, well, why is this guy sitting? Like there was no notification of this guy sitting. Like on the injury report, he has some kind of fake injury, probably for some uh, readiness aspect of things, of which like, yeah, we're going to hold you off in terms of minutes. But now that college, in terms of NIL, induction of that, there's a lot more money in play. And all these decisions are typically based off of money aspect of things, as much as I hate to identify that. But I mean, I would love to think that, I mean, it's a win-win, lose-lose in terms of whether you want to keep everyone healthy at a point of which is very safe. I'm not a person to necessarily want to necessarily go just the very, very safe route. So I would rather push the bar in terms of super physiological adaptation to whatever point you can be to, just because I think like, hey, if I never met my ceiling or if my athletes never hit their ceiling because of me, that would suck. But then at the same time, you're like, okay, well, are you willing to also put them in a dangerous position? And I think that's probably more dependent on the money aspect of things, just because that's where my principle lies in. But I don't necessarily think there's a right or wrong with that. But yeah, I think that's actually a really great litmus test in terms of hiring and firing of individuals of your organization, whether it's strength conditioning, performance, or even just general coaching staff. That's actually a really good thing to look at.
But even on that, like, okay, as a strength coach,
Mhm.
let's say 0% of your athletes get hurt, but you won 0 games, you are getting fired. Let's say 50% of your athletes get, maybe not 50, but let's say like 30% of your athletes get hurt, but you win the national championship, you're probably keeping your job. So it's like we
With a
kind of
raise.
say these things, you know what I mean? But it's like, okay, what are we actually valuing? Like, are we like, if I know a school, if they win the national championship, they're not changing shit, bro. They are not, it doesn't matter. They could, and again, a lot of that is surviving despite of, but it's like the weird, like, oxymoron there of like, we're saying we value one thing, we're saying we're doing one thing, but it's like your job also relies upon something vastly different than the thing that you are saying you value.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the
Well,
day, too, it's like strength and conditioning professionals. I'm going to say you because I'm not currently a strength and conditioning professional right now. It's been quite a few years, mostly just professor and sports science stuff. But the job is to induce stress. It's like I'm here to induce and manage stress to a certain degree to try to get you to the next stage of your development closer to your ceiling. But like we don't know for sure for that. So like the major job is like, okay, I think we push it, and that's the whole reason for it. So I'm under the impression that if you're gonna push it, you're gonna push it. If you're gonna pull the band-aid off, you're gonna do it. Um, but that's just my take. How
one last question I had for you, getting back to the technology, little pivot back, was if you're working with an organization, maybe with a low budget, you have all this gear. What do you think would be like a meaningful piece of equipment to have to monitor or just like gauge general athleticism or power, something that'd be good for a large group of people? Like for example, I work with some firefighters down here, and we have like over 200 from 18 years old to like 60 some years old, all different ability levels. Not a huge budget, but we do want to do a lot of testing just to see where they're at. Performance testing. What would be like a good piece of equipment that you think we could get meaningful results from and we monitor and do the same year after year with?
Yeah, doubling down on that. Let's go S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier,
oh,
F tier. Like waste of money versus like good
geez.
ones. List them for us. What we got?
Now
Yeah.
you're in a tactical setting with the firefighters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh man, that's an
Eh,
interesting one because
eh,
you don't see a lot of tech in
No,
that space right now.
we do a bunch of physical assessments, but it's there's always seems like this one isn't doing this one isn't doing that. Like what would be something that we could incorporate in there that's, not gonna completely blow the budget, but we can get meaningful results from. And I mean another challenge with that is it has to be an easy enough task that people don't need to train for 6 months to learn the task to do the test.
Yeah. Especially with firefighters and in terms of task specific strength or like what's deemed successful. Um, I guess before I give any crazy answers to this, um, I gotta ask you, in terms of like the overlying, probably like the greatest deficit you see in like you're looking at the firefighter as an athlete to do their job. What do you think probably is like the greatest deficit?
The ability to move dynamically, like in an uncertain environment. So like the quick, like the catch yourself, like if you're like jumping, having to catch yourself, having to change momentum are probably some of the biggest ones.
Man, that's an interesting one. Okay. I'm very biased. I'm very biased. I think force plates are so dynamic in what they can do, whether it's lower upper body movement patterns, whether you want to do something more dynamic or reactive in nature, whether it's like a drop jump or a depth jump on there would be very, very cool, especially since they have varying heights in terms of, I don't know how often it is in terms of they're changing levels of up a ladder or something, or they need to make some drastic, or they make a few decisions that are outside the normal realm of occupations for sure. So I think that would be definitely up there in terms of S tier. Other technological aspects of things, um, mm, in terms of tiering it, I don't know if I can tier it, but
Oh,
I would have to say um, some kind of body composition analysis has to be in place there, especially with a very athletic based job with not a lot of, I don't know how much oversight there is in terms of ensuring certain guidelines are taking place, like how militant it is in terms of that, because I know there's certain standards, but actually I wouldn't be surprised because some of those firefighter videos you see on YouTube where they're training are sick or super cool. So I actually would not be surprised. So some kind of body composition, I would say the most reasonable one, and I regret saying this, bod pods are just too out there. They take too much time. You have to be like almost naked with a skull cap on if you have any hair at all. Uh, in body, even the home-based ones have very, you can get them on Amazon kind of thing, $300, high reliability and validity, um, very easy to use on the take off your clothes kind of thing, which is always nice. Oh, ooh, for funsies, since it would be for funsies kind of thing, because I can't say this legally because it's not commercially available. I would say if you want to play with some motion capture stuff, now you have to determine what kind of movement patterns you would like to analyze. Um, would have to be open cap. Now they do have, and it's using iOS devices that pair up to a computer, but the validity of that right now actually just helped create a checkerboard calibration thing for some PhD student out in the UK, but they're doing some studies for it. Stanford Research created it. Really cool. Right now it's free. Free is always great. I love free. So that's up there too. Um, man, I think something that would be very interesting would be some kind of body temperature gauge. Um, I know they used to have, this is unrealistic, but I know that they used to have those pills you can swallow that gauges your internal temperature. I know they do it for some research. That's crazy talk because you can't reuse those. And if you did, you're nasty. So like we got that as well. But man, that's a hard one. Firefighters.
Do you have any
What
that you think
Ooh,
like
that's
waste
so
of time.
interesting.
yeah, waste of time. Like and
Oh,
maybe not just firefighters specifically if they don't have
Yeah.
the tech, but is there one that you think like people are overhyping or spending too much money on when
oh,
they don't need to be?
actually, a good one. There's two of them. Um, one of them in particular that's very reasonable. Calibre, Calibre, VO2 mask, which looks like a regular mask. Now I need to look personally into the validity of it, but for $500, it can apparently measure very accurate VO2 max.
Mm.
And it's literally the size of a mask. Now,
Okay.
the importance of that in terms of whether or not the firefighters have some kind of a greater play with oxygen consumption is pretty huge. I mean, their environment in terms of external gases they're playing with. If someone has a higher likelihood or some indication of some COPD, that can be pretty detrimental not to indicate and notify before they're going into a burning house kind of thing. So that'd be super interesting to see. Um, but in terms of useless equipment, there's a lot of stuff. There is a lot of stuff. Ooh, I don't know. I don't necessarily unless they have specific goals of like in terms of velocity trackers. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, just for athletes in
hmm,
general, even like a like
Athletes in general.
a private gym owner is like, oh, I want something for my athletes, and I'm gonna buy this, and it's like, okay, that you probably shouldn't have wasted $600. You probably could have just got a nicer barbell.
I oh yeah. Um, we gotta. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think any Olympic lifts need to be using an Olympic bar. I don't have an Olympic bar here when I was doing Olympic lifts. The lack of any rotation on that bar, holy cow, sometimes that can be scary. I'm also in my basement too, and I used to have everything out in my
Dude,
garage.
it's the worst trying to do ollies
Oh,
at Lifetime. It makes me want to shoot myself.
so but I think timing gates are up there. Now, timing gates are expensive. So I understand that. And software is a killer. Software can kill. And that's usually the greatest cost to everything. And I played around with quite a few different timing gates, whether it's self-reflectors by Timing Mate or Brower, Bald kind of thing. But a solution in which is not going to cost a lot over time. And this is not going to help me out with any future deals of anything, but can reduce that ongoing cost. I think that's huge. Um, and then if you have to do any manual data analysis yourself, it's worth it if you can learn how to do it. Um, but yeah, time gates and force plates are, if you actually use them, if you're not going to use them very often, then who cares? Eye test is pretty darn good. So Yeah.
Oh yeah. Anything for the athletes that you think isn't worth it that people are buying?
Oh. Hmm. Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of anything. Do you have something in mind?
No, no, I was just wondering. I
Oh,
was wondering
dang
if
it.
there was like I feel
Dang
like
it.
early on the big one, like it started off, that was what people were saying about the force plates, is like you're doing all this because they weren't able to do anything with the information. I remember the first time we got our force plates, how long it took to get anything out of that information. The season was over by the time we looked at it. And now it's like it's very quick and people know actually what to do with it. So like the use of the technology has increased so much. And I was wondering if there was anything that people are kind of like getting into. I mean, you can also just go into like the scammy stuff, like the you brought up the VO2 mask, and it gave me the freaking flashbacks. Do you guys remember those oxygen masks?
I had one.
Oh, yes.
The
Like
black mask
the
with the
black
white,
mask,
and,
yes,
and
like
it was
one of
like
those, bro. Like I'm thinking like
it's
any scammy things like
it
that.
simulates altitude. It's like, bro, I was just breathing through a straw. Like, it was just really hard to breathe.
That's what when you brought that VO2 mask, that's all I could think about, dude. The hype around that one was wild.
They still sell them at Walmart too, just in case you want to suffer a little bit. I saw them recently, and I think they're blue now as well.
Ooh.
Oh, I know. I know. So, off the top of my head, not. I mean, I think there's a lot of useful things, but if it's not, if you don't feel comfortable utilizing the information, then it's only worth that.
Yeah.
Like right now, I regret buying one thing, which was a lactate analyzer. I have not used it since getting it. I got a great deal, and I was like, oh, I better get this right now. I'm gonna do something with it. But I haven't been using it, and right now that makes that as valuable as nothing. So I think that's a huge aspect of it. Having a plan before getting into that kind of stuff is huge. Um, but yeah, I think force plates are a great, if you can get a nice affordable option. I think it's cool. They're definitely going down in price, but yeah,
Hell yeah, dude. This was sick.
yeah,
We
yeah.
got our full PhD on sports tech and Achilles rehab. So this was dope. I appreciate you coming on.
Hell yeah, yeah. I appreciate you guys having me.
Fuck yeah. Thank you guys for listening. Keep chopping wood.
Thank you for listening. Join us next week as we dive down another rabbit hole. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating. Follow us on Instagram at Austin Yoakum to stay updated on future podcast guests. Keep chopping wood.